This program is made possible in part thanks to generous donations from viewers like you.
Hello and welcome to the Suzanne Atwell Show. Thanks for joining us. In this episode, the endangered future of coexistence in Sarasota schools, the impact of recently passed Florida education reform laws, and the nexus of political ambition, parental rights, and censorship. We get opposing views from Sarasota School Board members Bridget Ziegler and Tom Edwards, an alarming distress call from the classroom from veteran teacher Erica Franz, and in defense of fact-based race history, Trevor Harvey, local president of the NAACP. We start in Tallahassee. Between March and April of this year, Governor DeSantis promoted and signed an unprecedented number of controversial education bills. House Bill 1577, the Parental Rights in Education Bill, also known as Don't Say Gay. It prompted national protest, including the Walt Disney Company, which the governor punished for disagreeing with his policies.
I don't care what corporate media outlets say. I don't care what Hollywood says. I don't care what big corporations say. Here I stand.
Also in March, HB 1467, the K12 Education Bill, it increases public transparency over books used in class and in the library, but also makes it easier for the public to call for bans, which has led to concerns over censorship. HB 7 bans the teaching of critical race theory or anything that makes students feel guilty or responsible for historic abuses like slavery. None of these reforms passed with bipartisan support. Republicans lined up behind the governor, Democrats were opposed. Sarasota County advocates on both sides receive national attention as part of the coverage of these stories. Pineview senior and LGBTQ advocate Xander Morris is a plaintiff in the lawsuit against DeSantis and the Florida Department of Education. The lawsuit alleges HB 1557 violates the First and 14th Amendments. School board member and co-founder of Moms for Liberty, Bridget Ziegler, was with the governor at the signing of the bill. She is a frequent guest on Fox News and a conservative advocate on topics ranging from gays in schools to critical race theory. To learn more about the support, advocacy, and justification for these bills, we begin our discussion with none other than Bridget Ziegler. We're here to talk about school board policies and recent state bills that were passed and signed. There's a lot of noise going around, obviously you know. And I'm going to start right away with the Parental Rights Bill.
So from Sarasota County, there have been undertones, and I think that's a really important part because in the sense of when you look at state statutes, sexual education is not taught until the grade of 6th grade. And so you'll hear this kind of counter argument of saying, well, why would this even be necessary? Right. And what you'll find is it's not so much instructional. However, there have been things that have been brought forward that someone would bring forward an instructional aspect in a grade of K through 3, but a lot of it comes down to instructional material, particularly supplemental material. And I would tell you that our educators, the extreme vast majority, have no interest in spending their time discussing this. Listen, if you ask every educator what they want more of, it's always time. And it's one of the first questions I asked when I became a school board member. Yeah. So they have no intention of bringing in any kind of quote unquote indoctrination or adding any additional elements to that. But what we have found is that there are, and I would argue a large part of it is a lot of the publishers or the vendors who create the instructional material and they're supplemental that are embedded in there, and they're subtle. They're not obviously always direct, and that is what we're finding in K through 3.
Subtle. What do you mean by subtle? I mean that.
Well, for example,
is there an example?
Yeah. So the first example would be if you think back to grade school when you signed your name, having pronouns at the beginning of that. That is a perfect example, which you'll find in a lot of supplemental instructional material. And so that's not a direct instruction. Right. But when you talk about K through 3, it started creating that. Well, why would I have to ask? Why would you create your pronoun if you have I have 3 young girls, and if you had the point where you're instead of of writing X name,
Right.
they're adding instead of Mr., Ms. or Mr.,
right.
they're adding their pronoun. And so it's starting to create and embed an opportunity to build upon.
The Florida Department of Education just banned, I think it's 54 math books over critical race theory. I'm just trying to bring it to light, more the examples of this that people can see. Because as you know, people are saying, what are you talking about?
Right, no, I agree.
Show us the facts here.
Have I had the opportunity to go through every single one? No, but I would tell you that I strongly applaud Governor DeSantis' leadership and the Commissioner of Education and the Department of Education staff, because that is a very rigorous process to go through. If you think about the depth and how much material they have to go through to make sure it not only aligns to our standards, and that's the best standards, but also to ensure with the new statutory language that was just adopted into law that it falls within those lines.
Speaking of the anti-CRT bill, again, specific examples about critical race theory being taught in our schools.
So I use, and again, I think the really important part is the subtle tone. And if you take a moment to, and I had to do this myself, and I'll tell you, as a school board member, I don't take little buzzwords and talking points to much merit intel, but I do start to take the responsibility to do my own research and determine what is this concern about? So over the past couple years, I took it upon myself, because I've said publicly, I thought some people, when they come to public comment, I thought some of the stuff that they were saying was a little out there. But I will tell you honestly, I have taken, and again, it's my responsibility to understand what the pushback was being, what was it about, and opine about it on my own time, and to be able to educate myself and make my own decision to see, is this real or is this some quote unquote manufactured issue? And unfortunately, and I was actually quite shocked to find out that that was not the case. And once you start to do your research and realize it's embedded in a manner that is and it's straight up cultural Marxism. And I will tell you, when those words were said at public meetings, I thought, what? Okay.
That word embedded, you use a lot. Yeah,
but
that's interesting.
but it is so important because it's subtle. So when you want to say, if you're a former public official, you understand public records law. So if you have someone that says, I want to do a public records request to see where the school board adopted critical race theory.
Right.
Well, in Sarasota County, that hasn't happened.
Florida Board of Education in St. Johns County has a policy that says students must use the bathroom of their biological sex and not their identity. What is the policy in Sarasota County regarding this?
So it's interesting, the policy doesn't exist.
Okay.
And again, it's a whole world of semantics. And as a policymaker, you can understand how important this is. And this is something I've worked on for years, and it is not solely about LGBTQIA issues at all. It comes down to transparency, decision-making, and transparent government. What has transpired and still exists today in Sarasota County, although they recently amended it as a result of HB 1557, which is Parental Rights in Education. But they are all done under the purview of guidelines, and that is across the country and not just the state of Florida and Sarasota County. So why would that be? Why would they be done in guidelines and not policy? Because then it circumvents the public board and the discussion to make those decisions.
And it's working.
I think it's blindsided a lot of people.
So you really don't, you don't know of any parents that have complained?
I do have scenarios of parents bringing forward complaints, and there's a number of them over the course of some years. Well, they're private conversations, so I don't bring those up. But as far as certainly in Sarasota County, because even when in 2018, when the gender diverse guidelines came about, again, guidelines, no one was aware of it, and it was because I thought it was absolutely imperative as a member who's here to represent the public. I brought that forward in a very public component, which to the not so much liking of my fellow school board members, but again, I will never apologize for.
Right, because a lot of the LGBTQ community feels very marginalized, obviously, by this transgendered community especially. So at this point, there is no policy. Teachers and administrators say that these laws really aren't about parental rights or protecting students. They're about politics and promoting culture wars. So how can you dispute that if you can't get out the examples?
What are you? I just gave examples, and I have, and there are more from that. So if you want more, we can keep going.
How do you hold on to that?
So I'm not an educator. I work in
Right.
business, I'm a parent, and
Right.
I'm a school board member.
Right.
And that's a lot of hats to wear.
Yeah.
But I take it very seriously. I come from a line of educators in my family. I don't make these decisions in silos and isolation. And what I will tell you is, I don't believe this is driven by educators. I believe it is driven by special interests who are pushing an agenda and that have lobbied school board members through the School Boards Association, who have lobbied through Equality Florida, have lobbied vendors, and I can give you countless evidence. It's quite a trail.
Bridget is an articulate and passionate voice for her cause, but frankly, the trail lacks data and documentation that shows these problems exist in Sarasota. And as we found, that is an opinion shared by many educators, including our next guest. Let's start with the K12 education bill. This creates a new level of outside control over lessons, reading material, even books in our libraries. How is this going to impact teachers doing their job?
Well, so much for fun reading. I mean, they're talking about, oh, the books have to go with these standards. Well, not all books go with standards. Some books are just fun to read.
Yep.
And kids aren't going to be able to fun read anymore. It's all going to be so driven based, and some of those books will be taken out of our libraries, or we won't be able to purchase books, or we'll get them and then they'll be removed.
How have parent-teacher relationships changed over the past many years in terms of feedback?
Well, it probably depends on where you teach and who you teach and what kind of students. I have a great relationship with my parents. My parents are totally supportive of what I do. You know, you hear that, oh, if you do this, they can sue you, or this, they can sue you. I mean, we already have kids. We had a friend of mine the other day, a kid did something a kid would do
Yeah.
at school. And, you know, ooh, it's math time. We don't do that at school. Because you already start thinking, oh my gosh, if somebody didn't like what that kid just did, they're going to sue me. So you totally deflect anything that could be misconstrued, that you're doing sexual identity, or you're doing,
Exactly.
you know, gender this or gender that.
Most people agree that we don't really need to be talking about this in K through 3. I think that's what it is.
You know, I've taught almost 30 years. I'm going on 30 years, and I've only taught K through 3. Now I have some fourths. Okay, I've never heard even fourth and fifth that's discussed. Okay, even in sex ed, or whatever they call it now, that one day a year, fourth grade does it in one day. Okay, there's never been that talk. And in K through 3, please. There's not even that. And if it is happening, then deal with that teacher. Don't put this big paint swash out there that all teachers do this. Maybe one person's done it in how many years?
Right.
But I've been around a long time, and you've never heard that happening.
Yeah,
we
I
don't
don't
have the
have
time for
examples.
that. Okay, if
Right.
they think we have the time for that, they haven't looked at the standards we have to teach.
Another hot button issue with our governor, of course, is racism. Florida now prohibits teaching that could make white students feel guilty. Each diversity training could be considered unlawful again. The subjects you teach, are you going to think twice about how to explain, if you do, slavery, the Civil War, and racism?
They don't want to be sued. That's what they keep saying. You can be sued. You can be sued. They can sue you for this. They can sue you for that. But I mean, you're taking away. At the high school level, my daughter was in the ACE program.
Yeah.
Everything was debates. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what ACE was. They were writing debate. And they brought up materials that people aren't going to. You know, that's not what they want. These kids are going to be bored. My daughter was absolutely challenged in the ACE program because of, in her pre-ACE class, you were debating slavery.
Right.
And sometimes you were on the side, you had to be the person
Exactly.
who had a debate that you were for it. Whether you liked it or not, that's what you had to do. Or in her case, she had to do gun control, and she had to be a gun advocate. Totally again. You're going to take that away from kids to learn that higher level of education.
Our governor, again, and Floridians are also very concerned about which bathroom transgendered students should use. Since you started teaching, what have you run into with this?
Other than hearing about it, really, I don't experience. I mean, elementary school kids.
Right.
We might send them in the boys' or girls' bathroom just to speed the line along, but
Right.
it started getting hot about when my daughter was a junior in high school. And that's when that whole bathroom thing first started coming up, junior, senior year. And the kids were marching downtown and
Yeah,
standing up for
remember
their
that.
friends who were transgender and wanting to use the bathroom of what they, identify as. And
Right, right.
so that was back when it first was brought up, and Sarasota agreed.
This all is obviously leaning towards the conclusion that these laws are not about parents' rights or education. They're culture wars, dividing us, continually dividing us. Is that an overstatement?
Oh, I don't think so at all. I think they're turning people against people. And they're making, we were just saying at school, they're making our jobs even worse. Worse than they were. And our jobs the last couple of years haven't been easy. And now, there's a whole bunch of us sitting there, if we didn't have 30 years in and being able to retire soon, but trying to hang on another 10 years just to, I wouldn't do this job. And I love my kids. I would teach my kids, just stay out of my classroom. Don't give me the paper anymore. I'm to the point I don't even want to read the newspaper every day. It's ridiculous. Because it's just there every day. Every day there's something in that paper about.
Sure.
And it's not the Herald, it's what's in the
Everywhere.
news, and they have to report it, but I would never encourage anybody to be a teacher.
Yeah,
And
I was
we have
going
a
to ask
shortage.
you, this changes, that what are people going to think about the going into education?
People aren't going to go into it. We already don't. We have so many positions in this district that were never
Right.
filled this
Right.
year, going into another year. And nobody, and we hired, 3 brand new teachers at our school. 2 of them are leaving. One's already left, one's leaving at the end of the year. They're not even making it a year.
So what do you think the hardest part of your job is right now?
It's the negativity. Every day reading in the paper, every day it's something, and the governor, we are the bad guys. We're absolutely the bad guys of everything. We're teaching kids this, we're doing that, we're indoctrinating kids.
Yeah.
That is the most, go see your local classroom. These people obviously have never been in a school and never seen what teachers are doing.
Thank you, Erica, for sharing your story. It is a sad, sad commentary on the political division in this country and the impact it is having on our schools and the teaching profession. We began with a conservative school board advocate. Next, we turn to a board member who is not happy with the governor's agenda. We're going to start with the Parental Rights Bill, also Don't Say Gay. So many aspects of this bill. But what we're going to start with right now is the prohibition of classroom instruction on sexual orientation or gender identity, K through 3. My question is this law necessary? And are there any examples of teachers speaking, having conversations with these kids, students, about these 2 issues?
I think the first thing that I'd want to say to you is that I can't think of a situation anywhere ever in my lifetime where a teacher spoke inappropriately about sex to a kindergartner or through a 3rd grader. I think it's offensive to teachers that they don't know how to speak to their students age appropriately. And that's never happened that I know of. So I start with that piece of it. The last thing, if you really study that law closely, and to your point, you said sexual identity and sexual orientation. Last I heard, heterosexual people have sexual identity and sexual orientation. And so therefore, we're not able to talk about any parents.
Exactly. Good point. Another provision in this is whenever a questionnaire is on health screening and it's delivered to the classroom, the parents have first stab at it, right? Because they have to get permission from the parents. Wouldn't this eventually have a chilling effect on reporting and identifying child abuse?
See, this again, I'm going to go back to this solved a problem that didn't exist.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you want all parents to be involved in the health care of all students? So handing out a questionnaire before or after, that doesn't make any sense to me. It's really about making sure that our children are safe and healthy. That's what we should all want.
Exactly. There's this Florida school board in St. Johns County. I think it says it has a policy that says students must use the bathroom of their biological sex and not their sex identity. According to several circuit court rulings, this policy does violate the Civil Rights Act and Title IX.
And it does. So you tell me where to go with that. I don't know what argument you want to have.
Exactly.
We're supposed to follow what Title IX tells us to follow.
Right, and that's implemented right now. Other counties, this is St. John's County. If there are any other...
I struggle as a school board member for interpretation of all of these kinds of laws and regulations, and don't say gay and stop woke. I mean, it's ridiculous. We all should be here for what's in the best interest of our students, don't you think?
Yeah. Okay, 2 questions. What's the policy in Sarasota County? And do you know if there have ever been any complaints from students or teachers about transgenders using the bathrooms?
I've not heard of one situation since I've been a school board member, and I belong to FSBA as well, and I've not heard any complaints from any students or any parents about transgender and the bathroom usage. I've not heard it.
Right. So that leads me to say that whether these laws and policies are more about political exploitation. We talk about that hot button cultural issues that anyone's rights are being abused or whatever. I mean, what are teachers telling you?
What I hear from teachers is not a happy story to share, because they feel that they're being persecuted and these laws are being passed when they're not doing anything inappropriately. There's laws to solve problems that don't exist. They know how to speak to their students. They know how to give instruction and what's in the best interest of our students. Our Class A school grade says that.
Sure. Another measure that passed this year, I think it's HB 1467, the K12 Education Bill, gives parents and district residents more to challenge what is being taught and the types of books that are being read and put in our libraries. So, does this mean that private citizens, which is a wide berth, will have veto power on all this?
You know, that's really an excellent question, and I'll tell you why. Because we just went through this about 3 months ago at a workshop. If a parent questions or does not like a lesson plan or a book that a teacher is giving to a particular student and they object to it, all they have to do is call the school, tell them that they object to it, and it's handled. It's taken away, and another lesson is given from that exact teacher for that exact lesson plan. The same thing with school books in the media center. If a parent objects to a book or anything within the media center, they just have to let the school know, and the student will not be able to check it out. So all of these particular issues have been, at least in our district, solved ahead of time, and yet but here's what's really going on, I think. We hear all of these banning books, don't say gay, stop woke. All of that is meant to create chaos for public schools. And you know what? We're all sort of falling into that trap, because here's what's going on. While we're trying to protect our students and find the right answers for CRT and all these issues, they passed a law that school boards no longer have control over accepting or denying applications for charter schools. That's what's really going on. So as I said in my op-ed, is it advancing political aspirations for elected officials, or is it the advancement of charter schools, or is it both?
And it goes way beyond K through 3.
Absolutely.
It's almost like K through 3 is what we're talking about now, but it's going to be more than that, don't you think?
I do, because when you sit down and you talk to high school students, I'm going to share something that I haven't shared publicly. I was at an event at Riverview High School with 2,500 students in the gym, and there was a presentation, and somebody yelled in the gym, if you gave a damn, you wouldn't have passed the Don't Say Gay law, and 2,500 students stood up and applauded. The problem is not with us, and Sarasota is better than that. I know our constituents don't buy into this bigotry.
I would like to think that Tom is correct. We are not a hateful, bigoted community, but we are in an overwhelmingly white and privileged community. That is not an indictment, it is a fact. Another fact, teachers are intimidated by these bills. That includes the study of race and American history. To provide insight into that part of the story, we turn to a trusted friend of the show, local NAACP President Trevor Harvey. What are your thoughts when you hear our governor, Ron DeSantis, say that we need anti-CRT legislation and policies because liberal teachers are indoctrinating and making students feel guilty to be American because they're white?
You know, first of all, when I hear our governor and those others talk about this whole CRT thing, first of all, I say, what planet really are they on? And the reason why I say that, you know, especially for those of us who have boots on the ground and we're very actively involved in our educationally, state, locally, and national, and I'm like, where are they getting at that our teachers are teaching CRT? You know, which is far from the truth. Our teachers are teaching the curriculum that has been designed by Tallahassee, designed by DC, and none of those contexts are based on CRT. Right. CRT is a legal, you know, was created by the legal community for critical thinking, critical theory, to say, hey, is it possible from a legal standpoint, is it possible that the reason why we see some of the things that go on in communities of color, could it be because of race? We're not teaching that in K through 12.
Exactly.
I mean, it's just not happening. So when you hear this constant debate that our public education is teaching CRT, we're not. They're not teaching CRT.
So what do they think the risk is?
Maybe the truth comes out, you know. That's the only thing that you can think of, is that they really don't want the truth to be told, that this country was built on the backs of, built on the backs of slavery, you know, and people of color, especially blacks, was considered less than a fifth of a man. I mean, that's factual stuff. That's true stuff.
Right.
You know, I mean, so why should we run away from what's the truth?
Right. So do teachers in our black community think that these measures will intimidate them or paralyze them into what they're going to teach their kids? And again, what they can and should include in the curriculum?
Well, you know, having the pleasure of having a lot of friends who are teachers, teachers are very, very afraid of, hey, I'm just having a basic, innocent conversation on what's in the textbook, you know, that you all designed and that you all written, and then somebody can take that out of context, and then now I am at risk of, you know, losing my job or getting penalized for teaching what's in the curriculum and design. So that's the trouble, or the troubling piece of what teachers are feeling is, I don't know what line to, you know, I don't want what line to walk. You know, it almost sounds like all they really want me to teach is 2 + 2, you know, equals 4, 5 + 5 = 10, and that's it.
Because that's easy, the reading, writing.
It's easy.
Arithmetic,
Yeah.
the old method. Another measure that passed, the K12 Education Bill. So it gives parents and the district residents more power to remove books. What does that all mean to you when is this what will happen, that they have the say of what books, if something doesn't measure up to what they think their child should be learning? It's basic censorship. So what about black authors? What would that do to the black authors of books?
Well, you know, first of all, as a community advocate and a parent who has raised, you know, 3 children, now helping raise 4 grandchildren, I believe in parental support within our education system. But I also believe there is a fine line between what parents should be doing and what our educators should be doing. Is it okay to seek parents, advice and thought process, on the various structures of our educational system? Sure. But to the point of now saying that we have the right to walk into a library and because I see a book on Malcolm X, or I see a book on W.E.B. Du Bois or Frederick Douglass, that I'm now going to say that book doesn't belong here and I'm going to pull that book, I have problems with that, because that's censorship. That's a classic case, of censorship. And I believe that our educational system should not be censoring our teachers, our students, but they should be allowing them to have an open-mindedness. And if they want to read about W.D. Du Bois or Frederick Douglass, or Malcolm X or Nat Turner, they should be able to read about those individuals if they so choose to.
But as these new bills take effect, how is the NAACP going to work with parents and educators? Is there something that that's going to have to happen in a way as this all moves forward?
Well, on a national level, which is setting the policies for us, how we're going to operate on the state and the local level,
Sure.
We're already having those conversations, is really making sure that our communities across this nation is really educated, on what's happening. Not only educated as far as what's happening, but making sure that they are involved and they are speaking up. Just like you're going to have this group on the other side saying, hey, I don't want that book there.
Right.
We need to have those on the other side saying, no, I do want that book there. Exactly. Because our children have the right to have a choice to be able to read what they want to read. The $1 million question, is it going to be important enough for everyone to step up, no matter what side of the spectrum that you're on? Is everybody going to step up and say, hey, wait a minute, I'm struggling with that. That's not right.
Right.
And I have a voice,
Right.
and my voice needs to be heard.
Trevor is right. People need to speak up. If they don't, the loudest voice, not the wisest voice, is the only one that is heard. In defense of parents' rights, I don't think any reasonable, moral person thinks we need to be talking to kindergartners about sexual preference or identity. And of course, parents have a right to know about their children's health and behavior, just like their grades. But education reform should be based on data and facts that lead to knowledge and the ability to reason, not suspicions, fears, and political ambition. If you would like to learn more about education reform, Florida law, and parents' rights, visit these links, and you can always watch this show and all our previous episodes on my website, YouTube, and Facebook pages. That wraps up another one. Hope you learned something and enjoyed the show. Until next time, thanks for watching. I'm Suzanne Atwell, and I'll see you around town.
Atwell Media is a registered, not-for-profit 501c3. If you would like to support local public service programming like this, please visit our website, suzanneatwell.org, to make a tax-deductible donation. Thank you for watching.